everyone. Good morning. It's good to see all of you. Thank you for joining us for what will turn out to be our last week together here with all of you. So we just wanted to say off the bat, thank you so much for being open to conversation, to actually listening to what Brian and I have to say. We know you don't have to, but you step into this space of tension and conversation. We think that is the affirmation of the community that you guys are, loving and caring, and really wanting to be people of Christ. So we really, really appreciate that. So, should we get started?
You should get started. Am I starting?
Yeah, you can start a little bit.
So I want to start by making the room really uncomfortable, because that's what we do here.
Yeah, that's what we do.
But I think something happened locally here in the last couple weeks that I think illustrates some of the themes that we've been talking about. So how many of you followed the situation involving Jose Flores? Okay, so those of you who didn't, Jose Flores was an asylum seeker from Peru, right? Peru?
Yeah. No.
No?
I can't remember. Nicaragua.
Maybe Nicaragua. Okay, but was an asylum seeker, and he was picked up by ICE. And what happened shortly after that is it came out that he was an employee of Oakmont Bakery. And I said to myself, oh, this will be really interesting to see how it goes down. The end of the story is that Jose Flores this morning is back with his family.
Yep.
Other individuals who have been picked up by ICE with equal asylum claims are still being detained.
You should ask why. We should ask why.
My question is, why?
The congressman got involved.
Oh, the Congress got involved. Yes. Why else?
The people got involved and responded to a GoFundMe page that brought more than $100,000 to him. But more importantly, it brought attention and grassroots support.
Yeah, that is true. Why else? Hi, Derek. Yeah.
I was under the impression that people had pressured Oakmont Bakery to talk to the congressman to get him.
So that is a half truth that Oakmont Bakery pressured the owner of Oakmont Bakery.
There was a social media influencer who put out a long video critiquing Oakmont Bakery, and in that video it was implied, either in the video or in the comments, so I don't want to get too deep, that the owners had turned him into ICE. Right? I actually think that was in the comments. I don't think that was in the video. That was not in the video. Yep, that's right. And so that was part of what started the social media firestorm, was this video that was put out, critiquing Oakmont Bakery for not making a statement, right? And then what came out later was that the owners of Oakmont Bakery had reached out to senators, congressmen, local officials, and put the pressure on. Yeah. Right? Here's my question. Just sit with this one. Would Jose Flores be sitting at home if he weren't an employee of Oakmont Bakery? Just sit with that question. That's the question I want you to sit with. Now, the critique of the question that I just asked you is, look at Jose Flores' profile, right? Like, the reason he was released is that he is showing all the signs of assimilating well into American culture. That's the counter argument. I want to throw that out there. But I think this ties a little bit of what we're going to talk about today, that we've talked about how race and faith, right? One of the things about the owners of Oakmont Bakery is that it is publicly known that they are people of faith who are active in the life of a local congregation, who have made it a company policy to seek to employ folks who have spent time in prison. And they are also almost unquestionably tilt to the right on the political scales, right? All those things are true all at the same time. And because we like to make them really uncomfortable, we just thought we'd throw that out there for you today. As one of these tension points.
Is one of the tension points, right? It is an opportunity for us to really, because social media was the crux by which this happened, right? And here we are in the forefront of that, and all that has happened since then. So one of the things to shift a little bit that I really wanted to start by talking about is, what happens in social media. And, does everyone have a phone? Everyone pull your phones out and hold them up. Everyone have one? They do. Look at that. Look at that. So I'm just going to ask, there's no shaming here. No shaming here. When you get your weekly report, anyone get a weekly report of how long you've spent time on your phone in a week? Yes. Anyone here, let's start with a good number, 5 hours?
5 hours.
5 hours.
A week?
Yes.
Or
A day.
A day.
A day.
A day. A day.
A day.
5 hours. Are we going higher than that? 6 hours?
Probably going
A
lower.
little less? 4 hours. 4 to 5.
4 to 5.
3. I gotta wave. 2, 1. Okay. All right. So we spend a good portion of our day on our phones, right? We get our information. I was teaching a class a month or two ago, and I asked a question. You know, it was black pastors and elders, and we were talking about health and healthcare. And I just raised the question, hey, when you have a health ailment, who do you call and talk to? And the overwhelming answer was Google. People will go on, right, you're not supposed to do that.
Dr. Google.
Dr. Google did that, right? So my question to start off is simple, right? When you go on social media, when you're on your phone, do you ever hear or witness things that are the opposite of what you think? So you do. I got a whole bunch of no's, a couple yeses here. Did you want to say something? Is that why you raised your hand? You're just acknowledging it? Yes. Okay. So what ends up happening is, and Brian, my brother Brian, has really educated me on this. Is there's a thing called an algorithm, right? And once we start clicking and rolling, and I don't know the actual seconds. Is it 7 seconds, 8 seconds? You watch.
I guess.
It's a guess. If you go past the 10-second of watching a certain video or some kind of stream, that links up to your algorithm, right? So what ends up happening is you will still receive those things that you like, that are positive, that have kind of affirmed the things that you were thinking and talking about, not only for yourself or the community that you're in. So I want to be clear here. For most of us, when we scroll, when we're in social media, it's kind of an echo chamber for us. It offers us an opportunity to feel good and also be isolated from what's really going on in the world, right? Brian started out with a really good conversation about what was going on at Oakmont Bakery. I think it's a microcosm of what's really going on when it comes to social media, which we'll get to. But I want to start by saying, for most of us, our social media is an echo chamber for what we truly believe and hold dear. Why is that harmful? Why is that harmful? Yeah.
Because we're being inundated then with people and media groups who are giving us information that we've indicated we want to hear, and we're not hearing diverse opinions on things.
That's absolutely correct. We feel informed. Oh, yeah, go ahead.
It's also one-sided. We can't have a dialogue.
You can't have a dialogue, yes. It's just us looking, digesting, and moving forward. Yeah, Mike.
But we think truth is obvious.
We think-
keep seeing it.
That's right.
And if people deny it, then they just don't want to see the reality.
That's right.
It's the reality that's made for us.
That's right. My favorite, my wife who's in the room, she'll say, tell me something, or I'll say something to her, and I'm like, how do we know? Well, the internet told us, right? The internet told us, right? That's what we say. Yeah.
We heard the CNN commentator, Van Jones, I believe.
Yeah.
talk.
Mhm.
And he said if if you're conservative and you're watching Fox News, or if you're liberal and you're watching CNN, you need to 1 or 2 days a week look at the other one. Because you get exactly what you said. They're pushing what the corporation, CNN or Fox or whatever it is, pushes. And you need to be exposed to the other side.
So what he said was, and I'll get to both of you in a second, he said was, one of the commentators from CNN urged one of their viewers to watch the quote-unquote opposite. So if you're a CNN watcher, you should watch Fox News. If you're a Fox News watcher, you should watch CNN. So I wanted to say that out loud. So that's a good lens.
This is like a Twilight moment, because, or Twilight movie or show moment, because so weird this morning, I came across an article that talked about how to fight back against the algorithm.
Mm-hmm.
So whatever suggestions they were giving me here, how do I know whether I'm really fighting back against the algorithms or they're giving me more algorithms?
So I was just going to, that's right, they're giving you more algorithms because when you're fighting it back against the algorithm. Yeah, go ahead, right there.
And this maybe piggybacks on Tom's, or Tom's is the correction, but it gives us permission to be intellectually lazy. We don't have to go figure it out. We can just have somebody tell us.
He said it gives us permission to be intellectually lazy. That's absolutely true. I'm going to pause here because you want to ground us in a little bit of scripture.
Yeah, so I think, so one of the things that I probably can lay claim to in this room is I have probably been on Facebook longer than almost anybody in this room. And the reason is that I had a .edu email address when all my youth group kids were on Facebook, so I got to join Facebook in 2006. Okay, so it means I've been on Facebook for 20 years. And one of the really interesting things about social media is that social media invites us to ingest information, right? Written, videos, memes, whatever, right? Funny, ridiculous, serious, all this kind of stuff. But one of the things that I know I find personally, and maybe you are a better person than I, right? But in general, when I'm engaging on social media, I am engaging in order to respond to and not listen to. And a couple months ago, one of our churches got themselves into a social media firestorm that they deserved, by the way, but a social media firestorm nonetheless. And what happened is that there were people caught in that who did not deserve to be caught in it. Okay? So, not to paint the whole thing with broad strokes, which I'm going to warn against at the end, is they got themselves into this situation, but what happened was not right or fair in the way that people were treated. And as this happened, I had already been scheduled to preach there. And so one of the worst ideas ever is to find out that the Holy Spirit decided to line you up on a Sunday at church is in crisis, and you're not even the real pastor. And so I'm praying about what on earth I need to, I have no script for this, and I came across the text of the 4th chapter of the book of John. 4th chapter of the book of John is an incredibly long passage, so I'm not going to read it to you. It's 35 verses if you read the whole thing. It's 27 if you cut it off a little at the end. But it's the story of Jesus and the Samaritan woman at the well. And if you read that story, and you read it in all its cultural depth, the Samaritan woman is simply picking fights with Jesus every chance she gets. It comes across, because the Bible tends to vanilla-ize the language, as this very polite conversation back and forth between two people. But it wasn't. She says things to him like, you Jews say that true worship is in Jerusalem, but our ancestors worshipped on this mountain. She's intentionally over and over saying things that are just designed to provoke Jesus. Now we know Jesus can be provoked, right? Just ask the Pharisees. Just ask the authorities in the temple, right? You can get Jesus going. You can even get Jesus to flip over some tables if you do the right thing.
Amen.
Right? But in this passage, we find that Jesus exercises a practice of listening well. Of listening well. He asks her questions. He absorbs responses. He answers her questions. And goes on and on and on. And what happens in the end of that story is that she comes to new understandings of him and who he is. And goes running back to her village and says, come, meet a man who told me everything I've ever done. If you don't know the background to the story, she'd been married 5 times. So when that woman comes back to the village and says that, people are going to pay attention, right? But one of the things that I think we've lost in social media that I think relates to discipleship is the ability to listen well.
Yes.
We tend to lead with answers, responses, and rebuttals. And that's, by the way, that's me too. And so I thought it'd be interesting to if we kind of started today thinking about the art of listening well as it relates to social media. And how it relates to our discipleship. One of the articles I read, and then I'll pause for questions and comments, talked about the flat nature of social media interactions, right? It's text on a page, it's a person's profile picture. I will tell you that the forums I engage in most online are photography forums, which you would not think would be rife for conflict and misunderstanding, and you would be wrong, okay? But an article I read talked about how how the danger of social media interaction is it is like metal on metal. That relationship forms the lubricant or the oil that allows relationships to happen. And so the example that I want to give is when Ralph and I need to have a hard conversation, we don't go out on the street corner in front of 7-Eleven and have the conversation where any passerby can be like, oh, by the way, you're wrong. And all of a sudden it's like, that's not what we were talking about, right? Social media conversations happen in a very public space.
Yeah.
And I think sometimes as it relates to our callings as followers of Jesus, we need to really think about public engagement versus personal engagement in electronic sphere.
Yeah.
Thoughts?
Yeah. Questions about that before I continue?
What did you preach about that Sunday?
That Sunday I preached. So the end of that sermon, I actually reread it this morning, was very unsatisfying. Because in the end, my sermon that Sunday was sometimes there are situations that you power through, and there's some situations you simply endure. And in some situations in our lives, our best thing is to endure it. That there is no fix, right? And that is one of...
Let time heal.
Right. And as a side note, right, part of the instant gratification dopamine culture we're in is that everything's fixable.
Yeah.
Right?
Absolutely.
And so what I've said to Ralph and our other colleagues about the work that we do is that oftentimes we have churches and we have pastors who come to us, and we joke that churches operate on two extremes. They either say, leave us alone, or fix us.
Yeah.
Right? And what we often have to say is, that's not what we do, that's not what we can do, but we want to journey with you through it. And that was basically it, right? There are simply situations that are to be endured. How I tied that back to John 4, I'm not entirely sure, actually. But that was where I ended up with that sermon.
I liked it. So for me, it's like an anesthetic, right? It perpetually distracts us, social media distracts us, and doesn't allow us to sit in silence, to really mourn something that has happened, because we get that quick snippet of affirmation or not, and then we move on to the next thing that comes across, whether it's on our television, our phones, and we scroll right to it. So we almost, that's how we get siloed and we lose the connection that we need to have for one another. You talked about what's common for you. What's common for me is a lot of justice things. My algorithm is, I listen to a lot of black podcasts by black pastors. Listen to a lot of affirming, how do you fight whiteness, racism, poverty, things of that. That's my algorithm, right? Very, very, very eye-opening stuff, right? But the danger in that is I can continue to hear what I want to hear and listen to things that I want to listen to. And I'm not able to connect to those individuals who just may have a different lens. I was talking to someone the other day, one of our pastors, about Saul's experience, right? And his transformation. And what we forget was Paul needed to be taken to where he needed to be go. Like we just had this moment of where he was no longer blind anymore. But in his blindness, he was still needed to be taken to where he needed to go. And we forget that. So in this place, we're in the process of going along. We're recognizing these things in the world. And what I think social media does, it dumbs that down. The opportunity for the Spirit to work among us, to open our eyes to some things that are happening in the world, because we get the affirmation that we seek to get. Yeah. So let me pause here for questions. Yeah.
Well, I think you need to recognize it can become an addiction.
Yeah. Yeah.
And have all the parameters that go with addictions.
Yeah. Yeah. It can absolutely become an addiction. That is absolutely true. Yeah, Mike.
And more clearly, it's designed to be an addiction. Social media companies have been shifted drastically in the last decade.
Yeah. Yeah. To pick up those things. Absolutely. Absolutely. Any other questions before we? Yeah.
Well, there's a part of it when kind of you watch the same things over and over again, you get desensitized to it. But also, I think, you can get angry about it, but then there's no way to deal with that anger. So you kind of causes people to kind of like get, you know, boiled up with the anger, but no real good beneficial way to release it. So we end up with people who are not sensitive because you got desensitized, but yet you're like always kind of going to pick a fight because you're always mad. And I don't know how we kind of find ways to communicate civilly across that divide. And I think back to kind of the efforts that were made in Northern Ireland, you know, kind of bringing the Protestants and Catholics together, and think, can we resurrect some of those kinds of initiatives to try to bring the two sides together? I don't think watching Fox News twice a week is going to do it.
I was gonna come back to that, but yeah.
But we need something.
Yeah.
So, my poor wife here is gonna hate me. One of the things she taught me, the many things she's taught me, through some work that she did was, around the listening piece, was there has to be curiosity. And the curiosity has to lead with questions, because that will allow people to go ahead, and then you can use your listening skills. It's very difficult, to Laura's point, it's very difficult when you have a set of either a moral compass or a set of facts that you believe, you know, very, very passionately, to have that skill set.
Yeah.
But that's, you know, if we could do that, that would probably help a lot.
It would. One more and then we'll continue.
I think listening is the absolute key, and I have told both of you that last week when you talked about the meme that was in social media related to African Americans, I sat in the back row and I kept putting up my hand at the beginning of that discussion.
To be clear, we did not notice you had your hand raised. We would have called on you.
Oh, I did. That I shared with you that it's probably good that I didn't speak out. So I'd like to do it now. But I'll tell you what I did last week after you said that publicly in this church setting. So I began thinking about anti-racism, and what I wanted to do last week was to stand up and say, for me in my house, we don't tolerate anti-racism. I mean, I wouldn't have spoken for the church, but I would have stood up last week because I need to stand up and say, you know, in my family, we talk about that a lot and have for years. And when we see it, we call it out as a sin, and then we talk about how we can help make a difference. And I think even more important than talking is listening. So last week after we had that conversation here on Sunday, I engaged at least 6 or 7 people throughout the week and told them how hard it was for me last week not to speak out. And I think we all have to understand that our speaking out in our circles, and more importantly, our listening to everybody around us, and then speaking out, will make the world a better place, because we can't tolerate anti-racism, and it is a sin.
Yeah, racism is a sin, absolutely. Thank you for that. I really appreciate. She was referring to before we started last week. I had an opening statement about the video that had been put out from our current president, or at least the office, and my views on that. And to all of your credits, thank you. You guys all clapped and applauded and affirmed that. I got a lot of confirmations of that afterwards. I really appreciate that. I truly, truly do. So thank you for that. I want to take a quick second. There are 3 books we recommended. I did bring a sheet for all references. I'll ask someone who's able to make copies of that for the room. I forgot to ask Derek when I first arrived. I apologize for that. So if we make copies of that, but I just wanted to tie real quickly some of the themes of those 3 books. So whenever you do decide to read, I've read 2 of them. When you do decide to read them, you kind of understand. So the first thing is, you know, they push back on this idea that smartphones are tools. Okay, so I think 2 of you alluded to the programmability of the phone, it can be addicting, and it's made to be addicting, right? So what Brian has taught me actually is to use it as a tool because it can be a tool, nothing more, nothing less, right? So when I say what Brian has taught me, I mean to use, like we use, everyone's talking about AI, right? Everyone's talking about AI, yes, amen, everyone's shaking their head. So there's two very extremes of that, but there are a lot of us who are in the middle of that, who use it, and we think we use it correctly, right? So understanding that the intent for those who want to market and sell those smartphones to you is for you to use it more than a tool, for you to be addicted to that, all right? They also say in that the phone and the internet and the social media has its own liturgy, which I thought was fascinating, okay? So we often think of liturgy as an order of worship on a Sunday morning, but the digital world has a liturgy of infinite scrolling, the push notifications, the like button. To think of that as liturgy it spoke to my heart a little bit, right? And then the number that I got earlier, if we spend 3 hours a day in the liturgy of the screen and 1 hour a week in the liturgy of the sanctuary, we should not be surprised by our worldview. Our view of justice, power, and our neighbor is formed through, and this is, I think this is Ranke's language, by Silicon Valley algorithms rather than the Sermon on the Mount. That's his language. There's just two more. The next is how screens separate us from one another, which we talked about. And the last is just the discipleship that Brian mentioned earlier, where we are being shaped and formed in faith through the phone versus actually being in community together. We talked a lot about our neighbor, a relationship between Brian and I. We can't do that over the phone, or at least I can't understand my brother who, the world calls conservative, but really has some same values and understandings that I do over the phone. I need to be able to sit in front of them, be face to face, and have a conversation through relationship. So I just wanted to tie those in real quickly. So I hope you take the time to see those resources, read those books. They're really, really good. The one I didn't read was about family and social media and its impact on us as a family unit. I wanted to throw that in there for this congregation who really values the children and what they do. So, yeah.
The one thing that I wanted to add, the other book we didn't put on there is we didn't put on The Anxious Generation. That's right. You're right. So I want to take a quick 5-minute segue. If you have nieces, nephews, kids, grandkids, whatever, take it from one of the worst offenders who gave my kids smartphones too young. The Anxious Generation is well worth reading it. There's a lot of critiques of all of this kind of stuff, right? Somebody puts out something that seems to be really compelling and interesting, but what the Anxious Generation basically says is that you can tie two things together, social media and smartphones, not smartphones alone, not social media alone, but the confluence of those in 2013 and 2014 was when those came together, and you can then tie that to the increased levels of anxiety and depression that we are seeing in teenagers today, okay? So because we're the parents we made our kids listen to the Anxious Generation in the car, and we also made them, and I'm drawing a blank, and we made them listen to another book called The Awakened Brain, which is another book that I would strongly recommend, not related to any of the themes that we talked about. And out of that, our oldest, who was taking AP Psychology at the time, decided that he was going to do his research project on the impact of screen use and being involved in church. And this was a AP Psych class. It had to be approved by the teacher. The teacher happened to be a former parishioner of mine. And I was like, there is no chance that this is going to yield results that are in any way reliable, right? So he got 50 responses to it, and he worked very hard on the questions. He worked with his therapist on questions, so that the questions he asked that were self-assessing mental health came from her. The questions about faith and engagement came from me. So the question was, how often do you attend religious activities? How willing are you to attend those religious activities? Because if you have to attend once a week and you don't attend willingly, you're going to have a different response than if it is kids who willingly attend often. And do a self-assessment of mental health. What the results showed was that even in that small subset of 50 responses, kids who willingly attended religious services once a month or more self-evaluated their mental health a half point higher. So 3.5 out of 5 versus 3 out of 5. That statistically is not insignificant, right? Like you could see clear breaking lines. And so I also just want to say one of the things I think the church sometimes puts itself in is a spot of where we are responding and feel like we are trying to catch up when we are in fact one of the antidotes to the problem, right? One of the greatest tragedies in the world is when all these camp and conference centers got cell phone towers, right? There was a day when about 30 miles from Lauraville, you lost cell phone service, right? And there was no cell phones. You have to worry about it. Your kids didn't have phones, nothing. It was completely a cell phone free time. One of the things that the church is a place where kids form and engage in deep community where they're not getting graded for it, right? Kids in school are still getting graded. Oh, they're around kids all day. Yeah, they're getting a grade. And they're not always necessarily the biggest fans of the kids that they're with. But church creates an intentional community that can be some of the antidote to this driver of connection that kids are seeking through social media, right? Why do teenage girls post more selfies than teenage boys? It's not rocket science, right? Look at the comments on any teenage girl's selfie. Beautiful, amazing, fantastic, right? Look at a selfie a boy posts. Bro, your hair, right? Like it's not the same. They're seeking validation and connection. And that is literally what the church has provided for 2,000 years. Thank you for coming to my TED Talk, right? Of like, when people say, well, what good is the church? The church provides what so many people are seeking through social media, especially our emerging generation that has grown up with this stuff in their pocket.
Yeah, we just need to start asking the question, is this helping us become more like Christ, this phone, this social media, these things? Or is it conforming? We hear from Paul in Romans, are we conforming or not? Are we conforming to this world? Or are we living are we living out of love and compassion and justice? Or are we conforming to a pattern of this world? We need to start asking our questions out more and more and more of our phones and our use of it.
Of which Ralph and I are the foremost offenders.
We are.
To be very clear.
We are.
This is not a shaming you need
This
to.
is an opportunity for us in community. So we're gonna do like just to be clear, we're gonna maybe 3 to 4 more minutes, and then we're gonna open up for questions not only from today, from previous weeks. So completely open. Any questions relevant? So we had a question in the back.
I just think it's interesting how you see more and more schools are experimenting with taking phones out of classrooms.
Yeah.
Like totally out of the middle school. And I found it kind of interesting then that some parents who were against the idea was saying, how will I get in touch with my student? Or the student was saying, how will I get in touch with my parents? And I thought 50 years ago we didn't care about that.
That's right.
So obviously that's not an issue.
Yeah.
And in the news recently, there was an article about Sweden completely doing away with screen time in classrooms and going back to books and handwriting and all of that old-fashioned stuff. Maybe we need to investigate that more.
Yeah.
I'll piggyback on that. I'm a teacher, so I take my students' phones. It's not a policy in our school, but for 5th graders, we take their phones, put it in the basket, and that's the first question they ask, well, how am I going to call my mom? I said, I have every one of your parents' numbers in my phone. So if they need to get a hold of you, they come up with me first. So we've had no issues with parents worrying about the phones, but we make our kids learn it. So it's very positive.
I just want to say, specifically to this point, there was legislation that Sewickley people were involved in recently that's coming through that is, I don't know if anybody knows specifics and can speak to it, but getting rid of phones completely in Pennsylvania schools.
Oh.
Yeah, I think it's a bill
huge.
just passed.
Yeah.
I believe, I could be totally misspeaking, but I'm pretty sure it was.
Yeah.
Getting rid of phones
in
Getting
schools.
rid of phones completely in schools.
Completely in
They're gonna
schools?
have bags.
Okay.
They have
I hadn't heard that.
phones in,
Okay.
disable them.
Okay. Okay. Yeah, in the back.
I remember earlier you guys were talking about how the church and people were getting mixed in the crossfire who shouldn't have been getting hate. I remember a good example right now, another one. Have you guys ever heard of Roblox?
Roadblocks? Oh yeah.
Yeah.
Oh yeah.
Yeah, everyone is
Do you want to explain what Roblox is to
at least half of them have no idea what Roblox is.
More than half don't know what Roblox is. Do you want to explain what Roblox is? Yeah.
So basically Roblox is a video game where for like the age verifications and like chat, like you can only talk to people in your age group.
Yeah. Yeah.
And it's like he's getting so much hate, but basically it turns out that someone behind the scenes is making these,
Mm-hmm.
and basically everyone's hating on the CEO because they see the big boss and all these like bad updates. Like he has to be like the one doing this.
Mhm.
They hate him, but he's innocent. We should be hating the guy behind the scenes.
Yeah, who's really doing it, right? Is that what your point is? Yeah, yeah. Thank you for bringing that up. I appreciate that. My kids know that very, very well. Any other questions, thoughts? So we'll pause on the social media front and just open it up for questions. So the 3 weeks we talked about whiteness, and it's the water we swim in. We talked about Christian nationalism and how it's detrimental to society as a whole in the United States. And this week we talked about social media a little bit and the conformity of it and how we need to move away from it. So all that's fair game. Or if you have no question about that and you thought, I got Brian and Ralph hostage here, I really want to ask them a question that they may not want to answer, but we will answer to the best of our ability. So any questions for us? Don't be shy. Yeah.
I was thinking maybe you'd come back for another 3 weeks.
I appreciate that, and when our schedule aligns, we will absolutely do that. Thank you. Right here, somebody, yeah.
So in the early 60s, around the time of the Civil Rights Movement, my parents lived here in Pittsburgh and participated in some racial dialogue.
Mm-hmm.
And it was set up that basically couples got together from various venues, black and white couples,
Mm-hmm.
and met regularly just to have conversations.
Mm-hmm.
And then there were other occasions where the families also got together, so kids got brought along.
Yeah.
It was done as an effort to try to kind of bridge that gap and kind of the racial divide. And I've been kind of wondering if maybe we need to reinstitute some things like that, not just race, but maybe right and left.
Yeah.
To figure out how do we kind of find the friendship across the differences. And whether is the presbytery looking at anything like that to help churches like ours try to make a difference.
So funny you mentioned that. Brian and I are hosting an event on the 19th of March where similarly to this, we're going to have, we're actually going to invite anyone who's welcome, wants to come to have open dialogue. He and I will lead the conversation, but it's going to be at the Presbytery office. You'll have to register for it. So we're actually experimenting with that, inviting the churches to come out to have I hate using this language, but safe space so that we can have these conversations in a space where you should be able to express your opinion freely and openly and not get ridiculed for it, so that people can come together and maybe find that commonality that you mentioned. I'll just say a little bit more about that. You know, with that kind of opportunity that it incubates is real care for your neighbor. So, you know, Brian and I sit here seemingly of one mind, and we have similar. We disagree about a host of things. We really, really do. But the difference is, when we have those disagreements, Brian can walk over to see me, I can come over to see him, we can sit down, and then in between those times, we have this long dialogue is, how are you raising your kids? This is how I'm raising my kids. How's church going here? What did you preach about last week? And then we have this thing where we disagree about, like the other day. Can I mention the genocide one? Is that okay?
Oh, yeah.
Comfortable?
Yeah.
So we had a Presbyterian meeting, some of you might have attended. There was language used in that meeting where genocide was used, okay? So you can imagine what that was pertaining to, but Brian had a very different opinion than I did, right? His opinion is you use the word genocide, you can't come back from that, so we should be careful when we use that language. I, on the other hand, said you should call a duck when it's a duck, and that's a duck, okay? So we can say those things out loud, we can disagree in front of everyone, right? But we've built up a relationship through that for us to be able to say those things and still know that the value that we have as friends to come together and be able to have a disagreement and still love one another and advocate for these things like coming to Sewickley and having this conversation is more valuable than the differences that we may share. So, so just to affirm what you're saying, that's what happens. Like we get into these spaces and the why is misleading. Like the why for you to come is, well, maybe I'll get to know my neighbor in a way that allows me to see differently. No, sure, that may be a byproduct. But really what happens is you create a space where you come together and you really know that, hey, that's a human being over there too. That's a father, that's a mother, they have children, they have a mortgage to pay, they have this kind of the same things. And it is really hard to hate an individual, even with an opinion that you don't disagree with, when you see them and they're in front of you and you're loving on them, right? That's what happens in those spaces more than anything else. Okay.
I think the last piece that I'll add to what you said, one of my professors in seminary said, I pray every day for every member of this faculty by name, and I pray twice for my enemies.
Yeah.
He said, it's hard to hate people you pray for every day.
Yeah.
And that has stuck with me, I think. You know, I don't know about any of your families, but we have some pretty profound political differences just within our family. Mm-hmm. And you know, that is one of the places that I think can either become a place of challenge or a place of sharpening. Mm-hmm. Like I saw my wife masterfully handle a conversation with her aunt yesterday, in which she pointed out the nuance, and she said, "Well, we probably aren't quite where you are on this, but here's where we are," and it was a very helpful and productive dialogue that could have gone a very different way, right? And so, learning how to do that sometimes within our own families, where it can be the most challenging and most uncomfortable, I think is one of the real tests of like one of the things about being a disciple of Jesus that I always come back to is if you're looking for something easy, don't do it. Mm-mm. Right? Don't do it. Right? I love that line. Like, blessed are the peacemakers. Peace is made. It's not. It doesn't just happen. Right? Yeah. And so I think that's one of the key things as we reflect on in a world that is marked by acrimony and hatred and in many ways the proliferation of more and more extreme ideas through the power of social media, right? Like one of the things that we are finding out is that figures who otherwise would have not gotten any traction at all are now mainstream names. You know, people like Nick Fuentes and Andrew Tate, who, you know, 20 years ago no one would have known about them at all, right, are now kind of household names. You can go home and Google them, right? That all ties into this kind of social media piece, but also being able to respond to those things with questions of, oh, that's interesting. Like where did you hear that? Or could you send me what I often say is, could you send me the link? Yeah. Right? If someone says something, well, I saw it. Well, could you send it to me? I'd like to read that. Like, there's some really concrete strategies that we employ, and I think it comes back to, hey, we're called to be, as Ralph said, not conform to the pattern of the world. My intention is to be like, that's the most ridiculous, stupid thing I've ever said in my life, right? And it's like, that never goes well. Right? And I still do it occasionally, but
yeah. So we're talking about that. We asked for questions. Yeah, Mike.
So I've been thinking about this since you said it earlier about the difference between public and private discourse. So brief anecdote, because I think like the public food fights online are pretty bad, except I think everyone is probably historically familiar with Westboro Baptist Church, very popular, unfortunately, 15 years ago.
Yep.
There's a woman that like would post from there, from within the church for like every day about all of the hot topic issues, and people would argue with her on Twitter all the time. After like 7 years of this, she left the church from these people that convinced her how wrong her view was. And so I think that while it is a good rule of thumb to not have that happen in a public space digitally, there is something about opening ourselves up to that discourse. And I think that my question to you in light of something like that, where you go, man, I'm just speaking into the void, this is never going to change anything, which is very disempowering and I think different than how we should understand the Spirit to be working, is how do you balance the reactive dopamine hit desire in us of we want to react to everything, while also also not, I mean, frankly, in the context of talking about whiteness, talking about difficult conversations, it is deeply comfortable to say, I just don't want to talk about this because I want to make sure we should do this privately, we should do this elsewhere, when we see evil things talked about openly in all kinds of places. And if the church can't respond in a confessional tradition that we share, then how do we engage with it in a spiritually informed way? It's a long-winded question.
So I'll respond. I actually thought about that question this morning. So I have a friend of mine. We were seminary classmates. We are both ordained pastors in the same denomination. She and I could not disagree more politically. I once made the mistake of commenting publicly on one of her posts. And what happened was that my comment was perceived as hurtful to her personally. And so we have a no public commenting rule between us. Now, she lives far away. Like, I can't have coffee with her, right? But if I have a response or a challenge, I will message her first and be like, saw you posted, tell me more, right? Like, that's how I've learned to do it, and I am not a great person at public conflict. But I have found that is, but I like her. Here's the difference. I like her. I don't want to burn that bridge, right? Some of the people on her Facebook page, I don't know at all, but I don't want to burn that bridge. She was tremendously helpful to me when I was in seminary. So engaging with people who I want to like helps me engage better. I've had things, so during COVID, where I did get myself into the middle of some Facebook fights, was that during COVID, my background is in data analysis. So I was downloading the Allegheny County COVID numbers, running them and modeling when we were going to peak and when we weren't. Why? Because our churches had to make decisions on how bad of a swell this was going to be, right? And so I was trying to provide the best advice I could. And I got into a whole bunch, like not necessarily me, but people would get into it in my comments. And I would sometimes step in and say, I'm going to freeze comments because both of you are friends of mine and you're not going to do this. And like call out unhelpful dialogue. So those would be the two ways that I've approached it that I think have been helpful and faithful, which is prioritize the interpersonal comments and kind of put a stop to it when people are talking past one another.
So I'm not like that. I dive right into the conflict. So what I would say is why, Mike? So you're right. You know, we limit the spirit when we say, you know, we're speaking into the void. Well, I do think that's limiting the spirit to conversation. You know, if it hasn't been clear these 3 weeks, I apologize. Indifference is a sin right now, right? We cannot sit still and not speak into it. But to answer your question directly, Mike, I would absolutely love if there was an opportunity for a community of individuals to speak on something that we all maybe agree or vaguely agree about the world and what has happened. But why that happens is just as important. Are we doing it just to look good? Are we doing it because someone has yelled at us about it and we haven't said something, so now we're going to say something? You know, the why is just as important as what we say, right? And I think the substance of that why comes from things like this, where people who I've talked to in this room who have different lenses can agree on, yeah, that video, that was wrong, Ralph. I'm really sorry. That's terrible, right? So when you have that common denominator and there's something that the Spirit moves within you to say something out loud into the void, I guess, you should absolutely do it, right? The problem with that, though, is, right, we'll sit in our comfortableness and be like, you know what, man, that's terrible, but I'm not touching it. God forbid. I can't believe Derek would even talk about that in worship, or Mike, right? That's what can't happen anymore. Like, we need to be able to step into those spaces however we feel. Let me be clear here. However we feel. So, if the comment I made last week rubbed you the wrong way, or if you felt different about the video that went out, well, it's just a video, it's meant to be funny. We need to have those conversations. Because what is happening is you stop listening to individuals who were like, that's terrible, and start listening more to individuals like, yeah, it was just meant to be funny. You know, it's satire, whatever you want to call it. So does that answer your question, Mike? Because I definitely don't think, you know, I think speaking into the void is detrimental to the work of the Spirit. But also it has to be for a reason. The why is important in that scenario, right? Yeah.
So when you first came we had some talks about the people who spoke for God publicly.
Yeah.
They weren't necessarily our church. Can you share thoughts about, I got an email this week, PCUSA signed a letter with other faith groups urging Congress to codify things about racial profiling and not, very specific, enforcing ICE in and around churches. Like, that's starting, it was about urging Congress to change laws.
To change laws.
Do you know much about that, or do you?
So we have for a long time had a Washington PCUSA Office of Public Witness and Policy in Washington, D.C. The PCUSA regularly signs on and advocates for things. Our two biggest ways of doing that are divestment. Our General Assembly will get into big fights over what companies we're going to divest from, and the other is through the advocacy work of our Washington office. Where we often do our best advocacy work is in situations like that, of where we sign on to something from diverse religious traditions, particularly within the PCUSA. The real struggle has been, we have a lot of new worshiping communities. A lot of our new worshiping communities are immigrant communities. A lot of these immigrant communities are full of people who are U.S. citizens who won't come to church. Right? And so we have had a lot of conversations about how do we support our immigrant communities, particularly because people just don't want to come because they don't want to be targeted. So often we end up in the headlines for that, and it draws very strong reactions from people. But it is a very important part of the work that we do, particularly when issues relate directly to the life and the work of our churches. And we get ecumenical groups together that will have 60, 70 denominations, from Pentecostals to Baptists to Catholics to Presbyterians, are like, this is really not right.
So in having conversations locally, how has gentrification impacted the ability to have those conversations?
It significantly. Significantly. So I'm part of PEN. Anyone know what PEN is? So it's, but I'll get into its organization. We talk a lot about that. Like, how can we have these conversations where in the city, and especially over in the East End, where there's gleaming evidence of gentrification. That's part of the tension. I don't have a great answer for that. That's part of the tension and conversation but we can't ignore it. We'll get into these spaces and we'll ignore it, and we'll come together and we'll create these spaces where we're supposed to come together, but we shy away from those hard conversations. That's one of them, because we have to acknowledge that. Thank you for that.
I'm going to say we're at time. It is 10:54.
Oh, sorry. We could go on forever.
So about a 30-second closing thought from both of us.
Come back. Just real quick, I just want to say thank you for offering a space for a man of color to come and feel comfortable. I know that's direct related to Derek and the leadership here and all of you. I've been here for a few times now. I really appreciate it. It is extremely rare for me, Brian will tell you, for me to be this comfortable and be this open in front of a predominantly white congregation. So thank you for that. I really appreciate that. I'll talk to my congregants. Go ahead.
Do you have a closing thought?
That is my closing thought.
My closing thought is, as people who largely embody privilege, remember the great words: to be curious and not judgmental. Focus on learning more, not for your own sake, but that you might love your neighbor and follow Jesus more closely.
Well, thank you guys so much. It was such a pleasure.